Next speaker would be Dr. Ashford. Thank you for joining the session despite the big time difference of there. Dr. Ashford graduated from the University of California, Berkeley. At UCLA, he attained an MD and a PhD. His PhD dissertation was a finalist of the Linsley Prize for the best in behavioral neuroscience for the Society for Neuroscience. Currently, Dr. Ashford is a senior research scientist at the Stanford Veteran Aging Clinical Research Center, as the director of the War-Related Illness and Injury Study Center, the Bay Palo Alto Healthcare System, and the clinical professor of psychiatry and behavioral science at the Stanford University. He is the chair of the Memory Screening Advisory Board of the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, clinical editor of the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, and a member of a Medical Scientific Advisory Council for the Northern California and the Northern Nevada chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Dr. Ashford, please go ahead.
Okay, I want to start by thanking Dr. Young-Sun Lee for organizing this presentation and the organizers of the committee for inviting me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, and your slide is good.
Thank you. So the problem that I'm going to address is the issue of dementia. Dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and now we're calling it neurocognitive disorders. The latest issue of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that's DSM-5 of the Alzheimer's, sets up the definitions for Alzheimer's disease from the American Psychiatric Association. But one of the big problems we have is in recognizing the people that have this kind of problem. And that's where we need to have a global initiative, and that's what I will discuss here briefly. Alzheimer's first described this condition in a 51-year-old lady in a 1906 presentation published in 1907, and described neurofibrillary tangles and the senile plaques in this lady's brain after she had died. And it's turned out in many studies subsequently that the neurofibrillary tangles are highly associated with the degree of dementia, but the plaques themselves seem to be very much related to the cause of the dementia. We still don't know what this is or how to prevent it, but there are several genetic factors that we now are starting to understand. There are medications that can slow down the disease process, and we believe there's many reasons that we should take the disease seriously and recognize it as soon as possible and work on trying to prevent it. This falls under the category of dementia. So maybe out of all the cases of dementia, about 15% of people who are over the age of 65, at least in the United States, have dementia. About a third of them have pure Alzheimer's, about a third of them do not have Alzheimer's disease, and about one-third of them seem to have a combination of problems. And as people get older, there's more and more combinations. The definition in the prior issues of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual were basically a memory dysfunction, some difficulties with new learning, and additional cognitive deficits, and they had to sufficiently interfere with social and occupational functioning. The latest issue that's just come out of the DSM-5 defines this as neurocognitive disorders. And there's evidence of cognitive decline in at least one domain: learning and memory, complex attention, executive function, language, perceptual motor function, or social cognition. And these do not represent delirium or some other problem. They've divided it now into two sections. There is major, which is a significant cognitive decline that has substantial impairment in cognitive performance, and the deficit interferes with independence of everyday living, versus the mild neurocognitive disorder, which is a modest cognitive decline, concerned that there has been a mild decline, modest impairment in cognitive performance, and cognitive deficits do not interfere with capacity for independence in everyday activities. So there has been dementia and there has been mild cognitive impairment, and this is the effort to try to clarify those. I don't know if they've clarified it, but we do believe that it's important for us to determine what the problems are as soon as possible to help people to prepare for the future. This is an indication from Dr. Savage's work in this country of the proportion of people that have either Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, or not affected as you get older. And as you can see, by the time you reach about 80, 85 years old, over half of people have a problem with either mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease. This has to be seen, though, not as discrete conditions. It's a continuum that over a period of time, there is a decline that goes from the mild range here, it goes down, reaches a point where there's a threshold where you might change to a definition of dementia or go from mild to major neurocognitive disorder, and then many years more before there's a decline down to minimal function at all. And this is a serious problem because this just shows you the numbers now that are projected. They say maybe around 4 to 5 million in the United States, but the numbers may well go over 10 to 20 million in the next 30 to 50 years. So Alzheimer's disease is very much underdiagnosed. In the early case, it's a very subtle thing to figure out who has a problem. And in the early cases, maybe 25 to 50% are undiagnosed. You even see as much as 25% of cases undiagnosed even later on in the illness. But the undiagnosed Alzheimer's patients face very much avoidable social, financial, and medical problems. And we think that early diagnosis can lead to more appropriate interventions and actually decrease the disease burden on the caregivers. But there's no definitive early diagnosis at this point. Alzheimer's disease, this is just a proportion that are misdiagnosed. Initially, 72% diagnosed with other problems. We believe there's a need for mass screening. If 90% are missed early and 25% are still missed late, we have to figure out specific ways of finding out who the people are who have the problems early on. Many of the people who have problems early on deny they have problems. But Alzheimer's disease, we believe, is mostly a disease of memory mechanisms. And we think that we can do computerized screening to recognize who has the problems. And by presenting complex pictures that are easily remembered by normal individuals, very difficult to remember for people that have early Alzheimer's disease. So we can test patients using pictures. It's easily standardized for different populations all over the world. They don't have to translate language, just the simple instructions at the beginning. This is less affected by education, can be tested by computers, and the analyses can be either made by a computer on the spot or go back to a central location on the web and compare how performance has been across populations. The MEMTRAX test that we have developed is what would be called a continuous recognition test. This is the type of testing that's used by all the leading scientists who are studying memory at this time. In this particular test, 50 pictures are shown. When a picture is seen for the first time, we ask the subject to look at it carefully and try to remember it. But when a repeated picture comes up, we ask for a response. On a computer, that can be as simple as a spacebar press. The smartphone, a tap of the screen. The audience can fill a circle in next to a number on a piece of paper, and we can even do fancy magnetic resonance imaging scans where we can have a patient press a button and see how the particular pictures affect the brain and how they change when a person's trying to remember. So the test goes like this. You see a series of pictures, and you'd say, well, look at that picture, and is there a repeated picture? And so you look at the pictures and say, well, okay, there's a repeated picture. But that's similar to the last picture, but not the same. This is a new picture. Oh, that's a repeated picture, and a repeated picture, another repeated picture, but not a repeated picture. Not a repeated picture, not a repeated picture. So this goes on like that for 50 pictures. And when we tested over 1,000 subjects, about 82%, 82 subjects had perfect scores. But it's the people who made more than 10 errors that we were worried about, that are less than 80% correct. And we looked at this versus age, and you can see that the true negatives deteriorate with performance goes down with age, and the true positive performance goes down with age. And we can analyze this with a discriminability factor, and you can see how specifically how discriminability declines with age. There's more variance, and when we analyze this specifically, we can show that there's highly significant changes with age. But then the question is, so if there's significant change with age, there's actually, when you look at the standard deviations, you can see that the problem is that there are still quite a few people, even in their 80s and 90s, who are performing just as well as people in their 40s and 50s, but there's a proportionally higher number who are having impaired performance, and we can detect that then actually quite sensitively. We can, on the computer or a smartphone, we can actually look at reaction time, and people who are having a reaction time slower than we believe are potentially impaired, and people below slower than 1.4 seconds are definitely impaired, giving a clear indication these are people that should be looked at more carefully. So this is 12,000 subjects that have taken this test online. We've given it to over 20,000 people online testing. And this can be done in Bangladesh very simply, just like in the last presentation. There are many benefits to early diagnosis. We believe everything from helping the patient socially and financially and planning for the future, helping the caregivers, promoting safety and driving safety. And I believe it's the family's right to know and advocate for change. There are medical treatments that can be given for specific diagnoses. And for Alzheimer's disease, the cholinesterase inhibitors and memantine do seem to slow the disease course down. And these medications have become much less expensive since they're off patent now. Many issues for memory screening, but having a tester sit in front of a person and taking 10 minutes to do a test is just not something that I think can be used all over the world. But this kind of testing is inexpensive, it's fun, people enjoy it, and they can come back and take it frequently, and it's much more precise, reliable, and valid than the paper and pencil test. And the Alzheimer Global Initiative the mission of this project is to transition Alzheimer's disease and related illnesses from simple advocacy to momentous activism. Now is the time for research awareness, care, and services to individuals confronting dementia and to their caregivers and families to be a worldwide endeavor. Only together can we make a real difference. So this is the position of the Alzheimer Global Initiative. And they're recommending MEMTRAX as a test to be taken in countries around the world to determine when there is some kind of memory difficulties that need further evaluation. MEMTRAX test is available online at www.memtrax.com. It is a free test. There's a very small amount of ad revenue that's supporting the relatively inexpensive cost of the development. We also have research at memtrax.org that we're developing, and metafile.com is my background information. I'd be happy to receive anybody's email if they would like to know more about it. So thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ashford. So I have a question for your MEMTRAX systems. Do you have any experience on community trial, such as a rural area, some data from the rural area and compared to the hospital institution-based MEMTRAX result? Have you tried that?
So the study of 1,000 individuals actually occurred at 40 different centers, some in rural areas, some locally around Palo Alto. And we had anywhere from 5 people, and I think one time we actually had 150 people that we tested all at the same time. We would put them in a room. We would give them basically a slideshow. We would give them paper and pencil, and we would record it, and then we would use a very simple template that would just go over their answers and score them very quickly, and we could test everybody and score them probably in about 15 minutes.
Okay, so thank you. So, okay, so yeah.
Hi, I'm Yong Do-che from South Korea. I wonder if this system can be applied to the other country also, maybe in addition to United States.
So we have it working in France right now. It's been in French. The only problem we have is we have to translate it to other languages, which we're working on at this time. Just the instructions have to be translated, not the pictures. And we've actually worked on a whole set of different pictures for Singapore, which was interested in having culturally local pictures.
Yeah, it's very important. The picture actually developed one is a USA-oriented, culture-oriented picture. So Asian countries, there are lots of similar, their own culture-oriented picture. So we need to translate the picture and the questionnaire. Okay, thank you. Is there any question from the other side? Okay, thank you. Thank you again to Dr. Ashford. Okay, so it's a huge big time difference, so you can leave now, but it's up to you. If you can enjoy the join, please be there. Okay.
Dinner time. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Next